The air in the room was heavy, like the calm before a storm. Every eye in the chamber flicked back and forth between two women, two forces of political willpower about to collide. On one side sat Kellyanne Conway, the seasoned strategist, a woman who had spent years mastering the art of spin, carefully crafting words like weapons. She wasn't just prepared, she was armed, ready, convinced she could corner her opponent. On the other side sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, calm but unshaken, a quiet fire in her eyes. She wasn't just there to defend herself, there to make a statement. The tension wasn't loud, but it was everywhere. The cameras clicked, the microphones buzzed. Even the audience, restless in their seats, leaned forward because they sensed something was about to break loose. This wasn't just another political exchange. This was about power, about truth colliding with spin, about a woman who built her career twisting narratives, going toe-to-toe with a woman who had made a name for herself by cutting through them. With clarity and force, Kellyanne Conway's lips curled into the kind of smile she often wore on television. It wasn't a smile of warmth, it was calculated, practiced, the type of smile meant to disarm before striking. She had done this 1,000 times before, and in her mind, Jasmine Crockett would be no different. Conway had cornered journalists, political opponents, even members of her own party. She believed she knew the formula: set the trap, control the narrative, force the other person to play defense. But what Kellyanne didn't realize was this: Jasmine Crockett wasn't just another name on her list. She wasn't someone who could be talked over, or boxed in, or tricked into fumbling her words. Jasmine had built her reputation by being razor-sharp, fearless, and unwilling to let anyone, no matter how powerful, dictate the tone of her response. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had walked through storms before and come out stronger. The stage was perfectly set for a showdown. The kind of moment that doesn't just trend for a day, but gets replayed, dissected, and remembered. It was the clash of two very different approaches to power. Kellyanne's reliance on strategy, manipulation, and spin versus Jasmine's reliance on truth, composure, and timing outside the chamber. The world was already waiting. Clips of political sparring had become the new entertainment, and the stakes were higher than ever. People didn't just want arguments anymore. They wanted drama, authenticity, and decisive moments. And in that atmosphere, one wrong move could be replayed endlessly across screens, shaping reputations forever. Kellyanne's voice was the first to slice through the air. Smooth, sharp, dripping with confidence. She believed the room was hers. She believed the cameras loved her. And for a brief moment, it seemed like she was in control. But just beyond her words, just beneath the surface, Jasmine Crockett sat. Still, unbothered, waiting. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was calculation. Every second she let Conway talk was a second Conway dug herself deeper, setting up the perfect moment for the tables to turn. It wasn't just a debate, it was a chess game. And while Kellyanne Conway believed she was 10 moves ahead, what she didn't see was that Jasmine Crockett was already holding the checkmate in her back pocket. This was no ordinary confrontation. This was the moment two legacies would clash. Only one would walk away in control of the narrative. The storm was about to break. Before the clash could ignite, the stage was already heavy with tension. Cameras hummed, journalists leaned forward, and the audience, both in the room and watching at home, braced themselves for what felt less like a polite exchange and more like the opening bell of a fight. Kellyanne Conway walked in with the air of someone who believed the room already belonged to her. Her confidence wasn't quiet. It was sharp, almost rehearsed. She had built her career on weaponizing words, bending narratives, and twisting doubt into dominance. And tonight she carried that same energy into her confrontation with Jasmine Crockett. Kellyanne's strategy was simple, or so she thought. Box Jasmine into a corner with facts, pile the weight of polished talking points onto her, and force her into playing defense. For Kellyanne, debates weren't about truth. They were about control. She had perfected the art of throwing so many claims at once that her opponents would stumble, lose track, or collapse under the pressure. That tactic had worked for years in the cutthroat circus of Washington, where style often overshadowed substance. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't walking into this exchange as just another target for Kellyanne's tactics. Jasmine had come prepared, not just with knowledge, but with presence. She understood something deeper. This wasn't just about facts, it was about truth. Truth, when delivered with authenticity, cuts sharper than rehearsed lines. The moderators gave their introductions, their voices formal yet trembling with anticipation. Then the first question landed, as if carefully engineered to light a fuse. It was directed at Jasmine, but Kellyanne seized the moment, leaning in with the swiftness of someone eager to dominate. She began layering her words, one statistic after another, drawing on selective numbers, exaggerated claims, and sound bites she knew would rattle the less prepared. She spoke of borders, of crime, of American values under threat. Every phrase was designed to push an emotional button, to paint immigrants as villains and herself as the unwavering protector of the nation's soul. The crowd reacted in pockets of applause from those who nodded along, murmurs of discomfort from others who sensed the manipulation. Kellyanne thrived on this. She lived in the gray area between truth and performance, where confidence could masquerade as clarity. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't rush. Instead, she listened. She let Kellyanne run her course, pile her words, and build her tower of half-truths and exaggerations. And when Kellyanne paused, waiting for the crack in Jasmine's composure, she found none. Jasmine's eyes locked in, calm but unyielding, the way a seasoned fighter sizes up an opponent's overextended punch. What the audience didn't realize at that moment was that Kellyanne had just walked into the trap she thought she was setting. In trying to overwhelm Jasmine with her facts, she had overexposed herself. Every selective claim, every twisted narrative was about to be unraveled. The silence before Jasmine spoke was electric, the kind of silence that can make an entire room hold its breath. It wasn't the pause of someone searching for words, it was the pause of someone sharpening them. Jasmine leaned into the microphone, her voice steady yet charged with conviction, and the atmosphere shifted. This wasn't going to be a polite rebuttal. This was going to be a reckoning. And as Jasmine prepared to answer, the audience leaned forward, sensing they were about to witness something far bigger than a debate. Because in that moment, Kellyanne Conway wasn't just challenging Jasmine Crockett. She was challenging every immigrant, every marginalized voice, every woman of color who had ever been told they didn't belong in the halls of power. Jasmine was about to show that belonging wasn't given, it was taken. And just like that, the tables began to turn. The room grew tense, almost electric, as Kellyanne leaned in with her trademark smirk. She thought she had Jasmine Crockett exactly where she wanted, her boxed in by statistics, trapped by selective facts, the kind of ambush Kellyanne had used for years on cable news shows. Her tone dripped with the confidence of someone who had played this game too many times. She expected the same outcome she always got, her opponent cornered, rattled, and scrambling to respond. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't built for submission. She wasn't a politician rehearsing talking points. She was a fighter, forged in the raw battles of Texas courtrooms and the unapologetic trenches of grassroots politics. She didn't flinch. Instead, she let Kellyanne finish her monologue, her calm eyes never leaving Conway's face, her silence daring her opponent to think she had control. Then, with the kind of timing that can't be taught, only felt Jasmine leaned back, tilted her head slightly, and delivered a single sentence that cut through the entire performance. Kellyanne, you don't get to rewrite history just because the truth makes you uncomfortable. It landed like a gavel. The crowd audibly shifted. Kellyanne blinked. For the first time in the exchange, her smirk faltered. Jasmine didn't stop there. She pressed forward, her voice steady but powerful, carrying the weight of lived experience. She reminded everyone in the room that behind every policy number was a human being, a story, a community that had endured. She exposed the way facts were twisted into weapons, stripped of context, and wielded against the very people who suffered under them. Her words were more than a rebuttal. They were a reclamation. Kellyanne tried to interject, but Jasmine overrode her effortlessly, raising her volume just enough to own the stage without shouting. It wasn't anger, it was authority. She spoke of voting rights, of silenced voices, of a democracy that wasn't meant to serve only the privileged. Every sentence built upon the last like a wave gathering strength. By the time she paused, the dynamic had completely shifted. Kellyanne, the seasoned manipulator, was no longer in command. Jasmine Crockett had taken the narrative, flipped it, and placed herself at the center not as a victim of an ambush, but as a symbol of resilience. And just when it seemed the crowd had reached the peak of applause, Jasmine ended with a line that froze Kellyanne in place. "You can corner me with your spin, but you can't corner the truth." The room erupted. Kellyanne sat back, momentarily stripped of her usual control. And Jasmine, calm as ever, prepared for the next round, knowing full well she had just turned the tables in front of the nation. The air was thick with tension, almost electric. Kellyanne Conway leaned forward, her tone sharp, her words like pointed arrows. She recited statistics, half-truths, wrapped in confident delivery, and for a moment, the audience felt the weight of her experience. Kellyanne had spent years shaping narratives for power, years bending facts until they looked like truth. And she wielded that skill now like a polished weapon. Her intent was clear. Corner Jasmine Crockett, force her into defensive silence, make her stumble under the glare of the spotlight. But Jasmine didn't move. She didn't flinch. She didn't rush to interrupt or try to match the rapid-fire delivery Kellyanne was so famous for. Instead, she stayed still, her posture upright, her eyes steady, her silence deliberate. It was the kind of silence that unnerved opponents because silence can be louder than words. The crowd leaned in. Camera zoomed closer. Could almost feel the collective question hanging in the air. Was Jasmine rattled? Was she cornered? Kellyanne smirked, believing she had cracked through. She doubled down, layering accusation upon accusation, confident that she had seized the narrative. But Jasmine's expression, calm, unreadable, almost serene, began to shift the atmosphere. Slowly, subtly, the energy in the room tilted, because sometimes power doesn't come from shouting louder. Sometimes power is knowing when to wait, when to let your opponent talk themselves into a corner. Jasmine understood this with the precision of a seasoned strategist. Her restraint was not weakness, it was calculation. And as Kellyanne's words piled higher, something began to happen.
The rhythm of her attack turned frantic.
The smoothness faltered. The edges of desperation revealed themselves. What had started as dominance now sounded like overcompensation, as though she needed to convince not only the crowd, but herself. Jasmine's supporters in the audience sensed it first. They exchanged glances, small smiles creeping onto their faces. They knew the rhythm. They knew the quiet before the storm, and they knew their champion was about to move. Then Jasmine inhaled slowly, adjusted the mic, and let the silence stretch just a second longer. That pause alone shifted the balance of the entire exchange. It wasn't just a pause, it was a reclaiming of space, a declaration without words. I am not afraid. I am not cornered. I am about to turn this around. The crowd held their breath. Kellyanne's smirk tightened, as if she too realized, in that instant, she had walked into a trap of her own making. Because Jasmine Crockett wasn't a politician who buckled under pressure. She was a fighter, a voice for the people who had been silenced, dismissed, or ignored. And the quiet strength she carried in that moment spoke louder than any fact. Kellyanne could twist. This was the calm before the counter, the space before the storm, and everyone watching knew something was about to break wide open. And when Jasmine finally spoke, it wouldn't just be a response, it would be a turning point. For a moment, the room quieted, as though everyone was holding their breath. Kellyanne, sensing she had created a pause in the chaos, leaned back with a self-satisfied smile, ready to bask in the illusion that she had cornered Jasmine Crockett. Cameras zoomed in, pundits prepared to clip the moment, and the political machinery waited for Jasmine to stumble. This was supposed to be the part of the story where Kellyanne regained control. But what she and everyone else didn't realize was that Jasmine was simply allowing the silence to build. Jasmine didn't rush. She didn't scramble to fill the air. Instead, she stood still, her posture unshaken, her gaze steady. For progressive audiences watching, it was a masterclass in composure, a reminder that power doesn't always roar, it sometimes whispers with unflinching confidence. Every second that passed felt like a countdown, each tick echoing louder than Kellyanne's smug grin. Kellyanne's strategy was transparent, overwhelmed with a flood of data points, real or distorted, hoping to rattle Jasmine into defensiveness. But Jasmine Crockett knew this playbook too well. It was the same tactic used against women in politics for decades: bury them under jargon, paint them as unprepared, forced them into a corner. What Kellyanne didn't expect was that Jasmine had been preparing for this kind of ambush her entire career. Finally, Jasmine tilted her head slightly, as if amused. The audience leaned in. Then, with a calm voice that sliced through the tension, she said, "Kellyanne, I hear your numbers. But let me remind you, facts don't exist in isolation. They exist in context. And context is exactly what you're leaving out." That single sentence shifted the energy of the room. Suddenly, Kellyanne's mountain of claims felt flimsy, like a house of cards waiting to collapse. Jasmine had reframed the conversation. She wasn't just responding, she was redefining the terms of the battle. And this wasn't just about facts, it was about the story those facts told. Jasmine began weaving them together, showing how policies weren't abstract numbers on a chart but real forces shaping the lives of immigrants, working families, and marginalized communities. Her words carried weight because they weren't cold statistics, they were lived realities, Kellyanne interjected, trying to claw back control. But Jasmine didn't bite. She didn't let herself get pulled into the trap of debating on Kellyanne's terms. Instead, she kept steering the narrative back to the people who mattered most, the very audience Kellyanne's framing had tried to erase. It was subtle, but it was devastating. Kellyanne's rhythm faltered. Her rehearsed confidence wavered. The one-suit smirk turned into a tight smile, the kind that barely hides frustration. Meanwhile, Jasmine's voice grew steadier, stronger, carried by an unshakable conviction. Those watching at home, especially progressives and immigrants who often felt talked over or dismissed in political conversations, could feel the shift. Deep inside, this wasn't just a debate anymore. It was a reclaiming of dignity. Jasmine wasn't fighting just for herself. She was standing as a shield for millions who had been cornered in silence before. By the time Jasmine paused again, Kellyanne's supposed victory had already unraveled. The audience knew it. Kellyanne knew it. Jasmine knew it. Most powerful part wasn't what she had said did, was what she hadn't yet said, because Jasmine Crockett wasn't finished. She had dismantled Kellyanne's confidence piece by piece. Now the stage was set for her to strike with undeniable force. The silence returned once more. This time it was Jasmine's silence-controlled, deliberate, electric. The room was waiting. And so was Jasmine. The calm before the strike had arrived. Kellyanne Conway leaned back in her chair, that familiar smirk plastered across her face, as if she had the upper hand. The camera zoomed in, the audience quieted, waiting for the clash. She had thrown out every trap she could muster sarcasm, half-truths, and that patronizing tone that made her sound like she was lecturing a child. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't here to be lectured. She wasn't here to be toyed with. She was here to deliver clarity, truth, and strength on live television. Conway was about to learn what it meant to underestimate her. Jasmine leaned forward. Not rushed, not flustered, not defensive, just steady. The kind of steady that makes the other side nervous because it signals control. She let a beat of silence hang in the air, letting everyone lean in, waiting for her words. And then she spoke. "Kellyanne," she began, voice measured yet sharp. "You've built a career out of twisting facts and trying to spin chaos into something pretty. But what you're not going to do today is sit here and pretend like I don't know what I'm talking about. I come prepared. I know the policies. I know the people affected. And unlike you, I don't answer to power. I answer to the people." The audience murmured, sensing the shift. Kellyanne's smirk faltered just slightly, just enough to betray the sting. Jasmine didn't stop. She pressed forward with precision, each word a strike that landed exactly where it needed to. "You've made a living cornering folks with distractions, but let me remind you, truth doesn't bend because you dress it up in clever phrases. Facts don't dissolve just because you wave your hand and call them fake. And the people watching tonight, they see it. They've lived it. And they're tired of being talked down to by people who think politics is a game." Conway blinked, searching for her rhythm, but Jasmine wasn't giving her the space to recover. Every attempt at interruption was cut short. Jasmine's words, rising above, her tone commanding without ever losing composure. "See, I'm not here to play defense," Jasmine continued, her eyes locked on Conway. "I'm here to flip the script. Right now, the script says you've cornered yourself. Because the more you talk, the more people recognize that you're not here to solve problems. You're here to distract from them. And distraction doesn't pay the bills. It doesn't keep the lights on, and it doesn't keep our children safe. The audience broke into applause, not scripted, not forced straw, and real. That sound echoed through the studio, a sign that Jasmine wasn't just holding her ground, she was taking it. Kellyanne tried to cut in with a trademark line, something about liberal talking points, but Jasmine barely flinched. She leaned in again, softer this time, but sharper than ever. This isn't about talking points. This is about reality. And reality has a way of breaking through no matter how hard you try to spin it. And the reality tonight, you tried to corner me, but you've just given me the perfect chance to show people what strength looks like when it doesn't bow, when it doesn't fold, and when it refuses to be silenced. The applause swelled again, louder now, carrying Jasmine's words into every living room, every phone screen, every heart of every viewer who longed for someone to finally stand tall. Kellyanne Conway sat there, silent for once, her smirk gone. The balance of power had shifted, and Jasmine Crockett had just turned the tables, live for the world to see. The moment Kellyanne tried to laugh it off her trademark, smirk sliding across her face, you could almost feel the tension thicken in the air. It was the kind of smirk designed to belittle, to dismiss, to signal that nothing Jasmine Crockett said could ever truly matter. For years, this was the move. Women like Kellyanne had used that smile to shrug off accountability, to reframe narratives, to downplay criticism. But tonight, in this moment, it backfired spectacularly. Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't rush. Her words. She let the silence linger long enough for the audience, the cameras, and Kellyanne herself to realize that smirk had landed in the wrong place at the wrong time. Then Jasmine leaned forward, her eyes sharp, her voice measured, carrying not anger but clarity. "You think this is a game?" Jasmine began, her tone steady, her gaze locked on Kellyanne. "But let me tell you something. For my community, for my people, for the young girls who are watching this right now, this is not a game. This is survival. This is our voice. This is the one chance we get to cut through the noise and demand to be seen." The room shifted. The audience, which had been half restless, half entertained, suddenly grew still. Jasmine wasn't just debating anymore. She was testifying. And the brilliance of it was that she never raised her voice. She didn't have to. Every word landed like a drumbeat, steady, undeniable, echoing deeper than any insult Kellyanne could. "Throw," Kellyanne tried to interrupt, her practiced politician's tone dripping with condescension. "Congresswoman, can't just play the victim card whenever the facts don't suit you." But Jasmine's hand lifted slightly, not in anger, but in a calm dismissal that spoke volumes. And before Kellyanne could even finish, Jasmine cut through with the kind of line that rewrites a room victim card. "The only card I've played in my life is the reality card. And that reality looks nothing like the fantasy you spin on television. My reality is young black kids being criminalized before they even understand their own names. My reality is immigrant families who work harder than anyone in this country, but are still treated like strangers. My reality is mothers who pray there. Children come home alive. If you want to call that a card, then maybe it's time you admit you've never held one in your hand." Gasps. A ripple of applause that wasn't supposed to happen in such a restrained setting. Even the moderators shifted, sensing the power of the moment. Kellyanne opened her mouth again, but the smirk was gone now. Instead, there was a flash of unease. Because Jasmine wasn't just speaking for herself, she had tapped into something bigger, something raw and universal. And in politics, once you do that, the debate shifts permanently. Then Jasmine delivered the finishing touch. A line so precise it hung in the air like a closing argument. "You can keep trying to corner me, Kellyanne, but every time you push, you only reveal the walls you've built around yourself. I don't live in those walls. I broke through them a long time ago." The room erupted. Applause, cheers, the kind of energy that couldn't be contained. Jasmine sat back, not triumphant, not smug, but resolute. She hadn't just turned the tables. She had flipped the entire room. And for Kellyanne, the silence that followed was louder than any rebuttal she could muster. But what Jasmine didn't know yet, what none of us knew, was that the night was far from over. The next exchange would be even sharper, because Kellyanne was about to try one last desperate move. But Kellyanne Conway wasn't done. She leaned forward, her voice sharp and cutting, like a blade searching for weakness. She tried to paint Jasmine Crockett as angry, as too emotional, as if passion and clarity were flaws to be exploited. Her words dripped with the old, familiar tactics, designed to silence, designed to reduce, designed to corner. The cameras zoomed in, waiting for Jasmine to stumble, to break character, to fit into the stereotype that Conway wanted to impose. But Jasmine did not flinch. She leaned back, calm and steady, as if she had been expecting this very move.
Update.
Room quieted, sensing the tension build. Conway kept pressing, each word more pointed than the last. Why can't you ever? Don't you think it was the language of dismissal? The rhetoric of someone trying to diminish the other side? The pundits watching from afar leaned in. This was the moment Kellyanne believed she had cornered Jasmine Crockett. And then, in an instant, Jasmine flipped the narrative. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't match. Instead, she used Conway's own words as a mirror, reflecting them back with precision. So what you're saying, Jasmine replied smoothly, is that when a woman like me stands firm, it makes you uncomfortable. When I speak truth without apology, it threatens your story. But let me be clear, I am not here to fit into your narrative. I am here to challenge it. The audience stirred. That line wasn't just an answer, it was a declaration. Conway tried to interject, but Jasmine pressed forward, her tone steady, her rhythm sharp like the beat of a drum. See? Every time. You attempt to box me in. You reveal the very thing you're afraid of, that power is shifting. The voices you once dismissed are no longer silent. And if you think you can reduce me to your caricatures, then you have underestimated not just me, but the millions I stand with. The crowd erupted. Gasps, cheers, nods of approval filled the room. Conway tried to laugh it off, but her smile faltered. The trap she had set now looked flimsy, almost desperate. Jasmine had done more than deflect. She had turned the entire confrontation into a lesson, an exposure, reversal. And then she struck the finishing blow, not with cruelty, but with conviction. What you call anger, I call accountability. What you call emotional, I call human. And what you call too much, I call exactly enough. The words hit with the force of a hammer. Conway blinked, thrown off balance, realizing too late that the exchange had slipped from her control. What she had hoped would be a cornering moment had become a stage 4. Jasmine Crockett's power. But Jasmine didn't gloat. She let the silence after her words linger, filling the space with a truth too sharp to ignore. The cameras caught it. All the confidence in her eyes, the steadiness of her breath, the undeniable command of the room. By the time Conway tried to pivot, the audience wasn't with her anymore. They weren't listening to her spin. They were replaying Jasmine's words in their minds. The tables had been turned. And not just turned, they had been flipped over completely. And as Jasmine leaned back in her chair, calm and collected, she carried the look of someone who knew the fight wasn't just about winning an argument. It was about reshaping the narrative itself. And in that moment, it was clear Kellyanne Conway had walked into the trap she thought she had set. The question wasn't whether Jasmine had won. The question was, what would she do with the stage she had just claimed? But Kellyanne Conway wasn't done. She leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and let out a smirk that carried more venom than any words could. "You're good at theatrics, Congresswoman," she said. "But theatrics don't build policy. You can grandstand here all day long, but when it comes to actual solutions, what do you have? Rhetoric. Slogans. A quick viral clip for social media." Her words dripped with condescension, her tone aimed to belittle, to reduce Jasmine Crockett into nothing more than a performer. The audience in the studio leaned forward, unsure of what would happen next. For Kellyanne, this was her comfort zone. She had built her career on controlling the narrative, on flipping questions upside down until truth felt slippery. She thought Crockett would stumble, fumble, maybe even lash out defensively. Instead, Jasmine leaned forward, her eyes steady, her voice calm, and the room grew eerily still. "Kellyanne," Jasmine began, her words deliberate, each syllable sharp as glass. "I don't do theatrics. I don't need them. What I do is represent the people who put me in this chair. And let me tell you what they don't want. They don't want excuses. They don't want manipulation. They don't want someone spinning lies and calling it strategy. They want accountability. They want fairness. They want justice. And you know what else? They want honesty something. That's been missing every time your side steps into the room. The silence that followed was heavy. Kellyanne's smirk faltered for just a flicker of a second. But Jasmine wasn't finished. She leaned closer, lowering her voice in a way that forced every ear in the room to catch her words. You say I'm here for viral clips, but do you know why my words spread? It's not because I rehearse them. It's because people see themselves in them. They hear the truth they've been waiting for. They recognize the fight they've been desperate for. But that's not theatrics. That's resonance. And you don't get that by spinning lies. You get that by standing up and refusing to bend when people like you try to corner us. The audience erupted in applause, but Jasmine raised her hand, quieting them. She wasn't finished delivering the blow. You want solutions? Here they are. Protect voting rights, make healthcare accessible, invest in education, and build communities where every child, regardless of their last name, their accent, or the color of their skin, has the same shot as anyone else. These aren't slogans. They're policies. Real policies. And the only reason you call them theatrics is because deep down, you know they threaten the very system you've spent years defending. Kellyanne shifted in her seat. Her polished confidence looked cracked now, like glass under too much pressure. For the first time, she didn't have a rehearsed quip at the ready. The cameras caught her blinking, her lips pursing, her body language betraying the discomfort she tried to mask. Jasmine leaned back, allowing a small, knowing smile to flicker across her face. You can try to corner me all you want, Kellyanne, but here's the truth. You can't corner someone who knows exactly who she is and who she's fighting for. The words landed like a gavel slamming down in a courtroom. The audience roared, not just in approval but in catharsis, as if they'd been waiting for someone to say these words aloud on this stage, in this very moment. And just like that, Kellyanne's smirk had dissolved. The tables weren't just turned, they were overturned, reset, and rebuilt with Jasmine Crockett at the head. The energy in the room shifted, undeniable and electric. Yet under the surface there lingered a question. How far would Kellyanne go to claw her way back into control? The battle was far from over. History is never just about the powerful. It is written by those who dared to speak when silence was safer. In this moment, Jasmine Crockett doesn't just win an argument against Kellyanne Conway. She becomes part of a lineage of women who refuse to bow, who turn their voices into weapons sharper than any blade of slander. From Sojourner Truth to Shirley Chisholm to Barbara Jordan, every generation has had its warriors who stood in the line of fire and said, "Not today." On my watch, Jasmine joins that tradition, adding her voice to the chorus of those who remind America that progress is always born from defiance. Her words ripple far beyond that studio. For every young black girl watching at home hearing Jasmine say, "I won't be disrespected into silence," a seed is planted. The seed of possibility, of pride, of identity rooted in strength. For every immigrant struggling to be heard in a system that prefers them invisible, Jasmine's fire lights a beacon. She is not simply debating Kellyanne. She is speaking to a nation, telling the overlooked and underestimated, your story matters. Your truth is not negotiable, and your dignity is not up for debate. Kellyanne, for all her cunning and political calculation, cannot compete with authenticity. Power built on spin is fragile. It cracks the moment it is exposed to truth spoken. With conviction, and that's what Jasmine wields, not just facts, but a moral clarity that slices through the noise. In the game of politics, where manipulation often wins, Jasmine proves there is still space for integrity to land like a THUNDERCLAP. The cameras keep rolling. The segment continues, but the atmosphere has shifted. Kellyanne may try to regroup, but the energy has already left her corner. The audience, both in the studio and across millions of screens, feels the turn. It is the turn when the underdog seizes the narrative, and the one underestimated stands tallest. When the tide no longer favors the seasoned strategist, but the newcomer who fights with the rawness of lived experience. And isn't that America's story at its best? The tale of those once pushed to the margins demanding the center stage, not with permission, but with insistence. Jasmine's defiance echoes that story, reminding us all that progress has never been handed down politely. It is wrestled into being by those unwilling to shrink. The clip will soon be shared, dissected, remixed, turned into rallying cries and slogans. It will echo across campuses, union halls, immigrant neighborhoods, church pews, and living rooms. It will stir debates, spark arguments, fuel hashtags, and inspire dreams. Because moments like this are more than politics, they are cultural markers, emotional anchors that tell a community, we are not alone. We are not powerless, and we are not finished. Kellyanne may leave that stage with her practiced smile and tact, but the imprint of this exchange will follow her. The strategist who thrived on spinning realities has just met someone unafraid to spin it back harder, cleaner, truer, and Jasmine, walking out with her head high, carries something even more enduring. Proof that when you refuse to be cornered, you create space not just for yourself, but for everyone watching. The legacy of defiance does not end here. It grows, it deepens, and it waits for the next moment when truth must confront power. Because this was never just about a single debate. It was about rewriting the rules of engagement. And Jasmine Crockett, in turning the tables instantly, has shown America exactly how that rewriting begins. The stage is set, the battle lines are drawn, and the story is far from over.